When nature creates turmoil like this, we respond with all the resources at our command. There's a more subtle form of destruction taking place in the west. To the casual observer, this might be a sea of wildflowers in bloom. They're in bloom all right, but they're invasive weeds, and they're taking over millions of acres of our public and private wildlands. With alarming speed, alien weeds can devastate a healthy ecosystem like Idaho's lower Salmon River. Yellow star thistle first appeared in this area of critical environmental concern in 1979. 2 years later, a spray eradication program was started, but it was halted by a court injunction in 1984.
For 3 years, we couldn't spray. In that time, yellow star, which was right here, went from the bottom of the canyon, technically right here at the river, and you can see it's clear up to the very highest peak. So in about a 6-7 year period, it just absolutely took over the country.
When noxious weeds spread, recreationists, fish, and wildlife lose. Idaho Fish and Game Specialist Bill Rybercheck explains.
The biggest impact is the change in the plant community and the reduction in plant species in the community from one which has hundreds of species to one which has very few species. And consequently, with the loss of those plant species that were in the native community, you lose the wildlife species associated with those plants.
Dennis Daly oversees the U.S. Forest Service's Moose Creek Ranger District in Idaho.
Well, I think a lot of people do feel that within wilderness, if you just leave it alone, it'll go away, and that's unfortunate. The alien weeds, the European, Asian weeds that we're seeing now don't go away. They're very aggressive in a natural environment. The Selway bitterroot hasn't been grazed by cattle or sheep or commercial livestock for over 50 years, but yet we're seeing a very rapid expansion of some of these species. They don't go away. They outcompete the native plants.
The Nature Conservancy's Garden Creek Preserve in Idaho is an outstanding example of the teamwork between the public and private sector to halt the advance of noxious weeds. The 11,000-acre ranch along the Salmon River provides a laboratory setting to monitor the survival of native grasses and rare plants like the sago lily.
This area is such a rugged area, and it's very biodiverse, a lot of different types of habitats here, so there's a lot of different types of flora. And it's a moderate climate, and so you find a lot of the rare plants here as well, some that you find nowhere else in the world. And that's our main purpose at Garden Creek here. This has one of the largest remaining good examples of the Pacific Northwest bunch grasses. And so we're trying to protect that, and we're also trying to return the weedy area to native grasses.
If our plants are well, the soil won't wash away. Air and water quality improve. But in areas like Moose Creek in Idaho's Selway bitterroot wilderness, the health and biodiversity of an entire ecosystem are being threatened by non-indigenous weeds like this spotted knapweed. Let's look at the big picture. In a short span of time, noxious weeds have skipped western borders from Montana to New Mexico. This is just a sampling of the problem. In Washington, there are major infestations of rush skeleton weed. Skeleton weed has claimed 4 million acres of land in Idaho. Montana has 4 million plus acres of spotted knapweed. Leafy spurge has a negative impact on public land in North and South Dakota. Whitetop is spreading in the Keating area of northeast Oregon. Our national parks aren't spared. There's spotted knapweed in Wyoming's Grand Teton Park, and infestations of Dalmatian toadflax are in Yellowstone National Park. Northern California is losing millions of acres to yellow star thistle. Spotted knapweed is on the move in Nevada. In Utah, squaros knapweed has invaded 140,000 acres of land. Spurge and spotted knapweed are spreading in Colorado. There's spurge in New Mexico, star thistle in Arizona, and the Bureau of Indian Affairs is battling weed infestations on its numerous reservations throughout the West. The economic loss from noxious weeds on rangeland and habitat in the West is staggering. In Montana and the Dakotas, 1990 figures reflect a $74 million impact from leafy spurge alone. On federal land, indigenous weeds spread on an average of 4,600 acres a day. That's 2,600 plus square miles a year, more than double the size of Rhode Island. The negative economic impact of weeds on western lands underscores the urgent need for early inventory and control programs.
And by inventory, I mean a systematic and regular inventory of the area you're responsible in, so that if you have any new invaders of any kind, you locate those as soon as possible, you identify the problem, you develop a strategy, and that is the key to success in dealing with noxious weeds.
This approach to keeping weeds out applies to disturbed as well as undisturbed areas. The BLM's Lanny Wilson.
A lot of people have the idea that the yellow star only comes in really disturbed areas, and that's true. It spreads faster in disturbed areas. There's also the attitude that, well, if it's really heavily grazed or overgrazed or whatever, that brings it in. That accelerates it. But here you're in a situation where you've got real deep soils. You're in a really nice bunchgrass type, and you can see what's happening here. The yellow star is invading. Now there hasn't been livestock on here for 2 years, and you can see it's just starting to take it. And you can tell what you can. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out what's going to happen here. In a few years, it'll all be yellow star.
It doesn't have to be that way. Integrated weed management is the common link between private groups like the Nature Conservancy and the public sector in the war on weeds. Ed Cole's watch is the 53-mile stretch of Hells Canyon National Recreation Area. That flowering alien weed he's standing in is purple loosestrife.
As we identify communities of these weeds, we locate those on maps, and then one of our primary ways of eradication right now is to go out and actually pull the weeds themselves. We're in the process of developing an environmental assessment that will address each of the sites that we have identified and address means by which we can attempt to eradicate those populations. And some of those methods may mean pulling or clipping the heads before they go to seed, or in some severe cases where the weed has actually grown quite large, go in there and actually spray it with an herbicide to set it back or eliminate it.
At the Zigzag Campground, Hells Canyon Resource Specialist Lynn Burton cites the benefits of getting an early jump on weed infestations.
Boaters, when they come down the river, they camp here overnight and do swimming and fishing, and it's just one of many places along the river here. We've got a yellow star population that's come in on this site here that we've found this last year. The last year we came in and just hand pulled as a means of controlling it while it's still a small population, and we've just come back to the site this year, and it's reduced down to about a tenth the size, and it's looking like hand pulling on this site is being very effective.
In northeast Oregon and southeast Washington, they're joining ranks in the war against invasive weeds.
We're just at the beginning stages of developing a regional strategy that involves all the partners, develops partnerships with regard to the landowners, the private landowners, and the federal agencies, the state agencies, and the counties. And the idea behind that is to pool our resources, pool our knowledge to develop a strategy with regard to inventory, detection, getting the public involved, getting the public understanding the situation before it gets out of hand.
Today, there's enough forage for wildlife to survive. Our goal is to keep alien weeds out of our healthy ecosystems. When an invading weed turns up, the economic solution is to eradicate it now. In some cases, herbicides are the most effective means of stopping noxious weeds in their tracks.
What we have here is leafy spurge, and we've got a piece of wipe equipment. What we want to do is we just want to come through here and brush the chemicals onto the plants here and brush it on so it makes a good contact with the surface. And after we've treated them, hopefully we can come back here in 3 or 4 weeks and see how the treatment's gone.
Many hands make weed pulling a good first defense in early detection and control of alien weeds. Why should you be concerned about the spread of weeds on western lands? The arguments in favor of a proactive approach to the problem are sound.
Usually what we're dealing with noxious weeds, at least in the Northwest, is a plant that is not native to the area. It comes from somewhere else. In the case of yellow star thistle, it comes from the Mideast. It doesn't have any natural enemies here. So when it does come into an area like this with no natural enemies, it tends to just explode in population. And what that does, it tends to then suppress native and desirable plants that may be of great value to the cattle rancher, great value to wildlife, both from a habitat and forage standpoint, where most noxious weeds have little or no forage value.
Your involvement is crucial in turning the tide in the war against weeds. Protect your stake in wilderness areas. Groom your stock before and after a pack trip or trail ride. If you're driving or riding an off-road all-terrain vehicle, remember, it's common for weeds to get snagged on the vehicle and spread. Lawmakers, invest in the future. Consider biocontrol experiments like this one in Bozeman, Montana. The tiny flea beetle is used to suppress leafy spurge, a major problem in Montana. It comes down to this. Which would you prefer? A trail ride through a stand of spotted knapweed like this trail in Idaho's Moose Creek area? Or this, diverse native bunch grasses and rare plants. This land, this precious resource, is our future. Isn't it worth saving?